What are the physical signs of burnout? So, today on the podcast, this is actually a replay episode. So, if you've been listening to the podcast for a little while, you might have known that I switched and rebranded. Originally, we were Rising from Burnout, and then we switched to She's Healthy last year. And so, this episode was actually recorded when we were Rising from Burnout. But today, I'm talking to my former client, Kimberly Roy, about her journey and just the things that she had gone through that led her to the place of working with me, and just the signs and symptoms that were showing up in her body that were physical burnout. So stay tuned to hear her story.
Welcome to She's Healthy, a podcast for ambitious women on their journey to become the healthiest version of themselves. I'm your host, Lori Aikman.
Right, welcome back to the She's Healthy podcast. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, I'm Lori Aikman. I am a nurse practitioner and I'm the founder and CEO of Crown Executive Health, where we help busy professional women regain and sustain their energy through functional medicine and a comprehensive hormone management. So today we're talking again about physical signs of burnout. And I want to let you know some of these things that we're talking about today. We're actually in the middle of a 5-day workshop for busy professional women. It's called Exhausted to Energized. And a lot of the things that Kimberly is going to talk about today on the episode, we're diving into why you have those symptoms. What are signs that are showing up on your labs? And what are the things that you can do to start getting your energy back, balancing your hormones, and feeling better? So if you haven't joined that workshop, we will post it. If you're listening on YouTube, we'll post it in the comments below. Or if you are listening on one of the podcast platforms, we'll put it in the show notes. But you don't want to miss that workshop. It's super valuable, it's free. We're providing you with a workbook to help you just kind of understand, especially if you do want to go in and take a look at your blood tests and labs that you already have, to look for signs that, some of the things we talk about could be off. And then the next steps for you to take to start feeling better, start shifting your hormones. So again, check out that link. You can also go to crownexecutivehealth.com/workshop. All right, let's hear from Kim. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Why give us your little spiel, who you are, what you do right now, and then we can kind of dive into a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on today, Lori. I
Mhm.
really appreciate it. I love having this kind of a conversation. So who am I? Well, I have
It's a huge
corporate.
question, right?
Yeah.
Who am I?
Yeah, I'm like, where do I start with that? And there's so much I could share. So professionally, I have a corporate background, but I'm actually currently in the midst of a transition right now. I left
Mhm.
corporate just about 2 months ago, actually, and I'm now pursuing a new business venture, going out on my own. So not to dive too deep into it, but I am going to be doing some podcast pitching to support, female business owners and, expanding their reach with their business. So I'm really excited about that. So that's what I've got going on professionally in my world. Personally, I'm a mom to a beautiful little girl. She is turning 4 this month, actually.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. So very much in the toddler stage. I'm a wife. I have a loving husband. We live in Maine, and I'm a runner. I love running, and I just love being outside and being adventurous and spending time with my family.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh man, I'm like, my daughter is 8 months and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna go by so fast. It already has gone by so fast, does it? When is her birthday?
Oh my God, I just have to think about that for a second. The 25th. Her birthday party is the 22nd, so I have
Okay.
that, like, in my head, but no, it's that her birthday is the 25th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be good.
She's
Yeah.
having a rainbow dinosaur birthday. That is
Rainbow dinosaur. All right. Hey,
Yeah.
she knows what she wants.
She sure does.
Aw. Well, okay, and so we mentioned a little, what you're doing right now, but then you also host a podcast, which is called the Redefining Anger podcast. So tell us a little bit about, because I think that kind of ties into your story, if I'm not mistaken, right? Of kind of what your story with that and feeling your feelings is kind of how you describe it. And kind of leading up, there's a psychological burnout, mental, emotional burnout, and then things showing up in your body. So where does that story begin?
Yes.
Big story.
That is a pretty big story. So that story begins in 2019. And honestly, probably even before that, I can pinpoint a lot of stressors that happened prior to that. But really, my redefining anger stemmed in 2019 when my father passed away unexpectedly. So we lost him actually on January 1st. So it was New Year's Day. New Year's morning, I got the call from my mom, that he had passed quite unexpectedly. And it was also kind of traumatic the way that he left us. And I was pregnant with my daughter at that time. So she, of course, her birthday's this month. So she was due in April, my first, and I'm an only child. So his first grandchild. Wow. So that was really kind of I would say the defining moment that changed my life. And so in the midst of all of that, being an only child, my parents were self-employed. So my mom, now a widow, I really had to help her, get back on her feet. And of course, and I wanted to do that. Yeah. I wouldn't have had it any other way. But, being in my third trimester, about to give birth to my first child, it put quite a bit of stress on me at that point in time. And where my parents were self-employed too, in the traditional sense, my father really did it all, right? So he was like the mastermind of the businesses. He was the man in the office behind the scenes, so really a lot of that was helping her to see those businesses through the liquidation, the estate planning process, and really helping her get back on her feet just to live on her own, right? So right down to the basics. So there was a lot of that going on. In the midst of all of that, the company I was working for at that time was also in the process of being acquired. So and the transaction of the sale was literally going to be happening when I was on maternity leave. Wow. So there was a big question mark there of, am I going to have insurance coverage? Because for a while I didn't know if my position would be retained or not. So there was a lot of that, looking for another job just in case, because the uncertainty, and then also just like of the timing of the situation, and as it would have it, literally the transaction of the sale happened while I was in the hospital. Wow. So it ended up working out, of course, but there was a lot of stress there. And then, oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, a hospital bill without having insurance, and then if you didn't, just coming from the medical world, if you had a job, obviously you wouldn't have I guess you would qualify for Medicaid, right? If you didn't have insurance and needed coverage for your child. Oh my gosh, yeah. That's stressful. Yeah. Just think about that. I know, right? Just thinking about, and I was like, oh my God, I'm about to have a baby, and I don't know what's going to happen here. So that was, I can still actually, when I think of it, I can still feel it kind of in my body, like that, the way I felt in that moment. It was a lot to carry. Fortunately that it worked itself out, but that was still nonetheless a huge stress on me. And then, my maternity leave, fortunately I ended up being successful in my breastfeeding journey with my daughter. But it was a rough start that she had some, what do you call them? The ties in the mouth. Oh, tongue tie? Tongue ties, yes. And, but of course it was like an insurance kind of thing where I didn't a specialist until I tried everything. And so I spent my entire maternity leave working with a specialist every single week. I had to take my daughter to not a specialist, but to the pediatrician, to see a nursing specialist there. to finally say, okay, we've tried everything. We can finally refer you to an actual specialist who can help you. So just the pain, I was
Yeah.
so much pain.
Uh,
My husband still to this day is like, I'm so surprised, so surprised that you muscled through that.
mhm.
But I was just so determined. So there was a lot there. And then coming out of maternity leave, I started my new job with my new company.
Wow. So you did change
I
jobs
did.
in the interim. Wow.
Yes, I
Mhm.
did. Yeah, I went to my interview with them and I was, like 9 months pregnant. And so there was no hiding that, right? So, but they were awesome because they were willing to wait for me. They were like,
Yeah.
we want you and
Mhm.
we'll wait until you're ready to come in. So,
And what did you do in that role? I'm just curious.
so yeah, my corporate background is banking.
Okay.
So
Got it.
I was in banking for, gosh, about 2 decades.
Mhm.
Worked in a multitude of different areas within that industry, and I left banking, like I said, about 2 months ago, in the compliance area.
Okay.
So it was like the behind the scenes, really kind of, I like kind of refer to it as the nerdy stuff. People are like, man, that stuff is boring. I'm like, yeah, I kind of liked it.
Uh-huh. There, to each his own.
Yeah, to each his own. Yeah. So I have a business degree, and so that
Okay.
was okay. But yeah, and then really what happened there that first solid year was a lot of just like muscling through. I
Mhm.
don't think, now I can reflect back in hindsight and really look at that situation and realize that I did not allow myself the opportunity to grieve the passing of my
Mm.
father.
Yeah.
Um, in the moment,
Mhm.
I thought I was doing it. And really what I mean by that is I was just putting on that armor of strength and I was like, okay, let's go. Let's go.
Mhm.
I got to do this, right? Got to help my mom. I have a baby here. Got to breastfeed her. I have, a new job. Like it was just like go, 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 go.
Yeah.
And I didn't process any of the feelings that needed to be felt. And again,
Mhm.
like putting myself back in that moment, I didn't realize I needed to do that. I just didn't even it didn't even occur to me that I needed to grieve. I was just like, oh yeah, I'm grieving. It's fine.
Mhm.
Um, and then, well, and then to add a whole other layer to that, when I said at the beginning that the way he passed was kind of traumatic. I'm not going to, dive into the details there, but we ended up finding out something about his passing that ultimately resulted in us seeking out a settlement attorney because
Oh,
of the nature of
wow.
what happened. And
Mhm.
so I was also working with a settlement attorney for it took almost like 2 years before that really came to a conclusion. And what resulted from that was we couldn't really pursue it. There was
Oh,
there was no
gosh.
there was no causation, so they couldn't really do anything with it. So it was
Wow.
kind of like earth shattering.
Mm.
Part of me was like, oh, okay, at least that door's closed now. But at the same time, it was like, another kind of like dig in the heart of like,
Yeah.
can't do anything about this. Like we know
Mhm.
it sucks, like what happened is terrible, but we just can't do anything about it. So there was a lot of that too. So
Wow.
years of pent up anger and emotions left unprocessed and just a lot of stress
Mhm.
ended up resulting in anger for me.
Yeah.
So that was really my go-to emotion. And I just became an angry person. And
Mhm.
I really again, now I can reflect back and I can see all the signs of it, but in the moment it was just kind of like, well, this is who I am now. This is just what life is. And what I did is I acted out my anger. So I
Mhm.
never got physical. But if I was in a terrible mood, you knew I was in a terrible mood. I
Yeah.
get so easily defensive. I would yell. I do the silent treatment. I would
Mhm.
cupboard shut, I wanted people to know that I was upset.
Mhm.
Um, and it was just kind of like norm. It was just
Mhm.
it
That's just
part of
how I am. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
And as they say, you end up taking a lot of those types of emotions out on your loved ones because that's where you feel the safest. And so my husband ended up getting the brunt of that.
Mhm.
It ultimately resulted in some turmoil in our marriage. that came to fruition at the end of 2021. So we're talking like 2+ years of
Mhm.
a lot of that going on. And then when that finally came to fruition, that was kind of like a wake up call for me. That was when I was like, yeah, there is something wrong here and I can't keep going like this. Uh,
Mhm.
and that was when I finally decided to seek some help.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. I just, you're summing up, of course, a couple of years in a few minutes, but it's just, I feel like that happens for me when I talk to clients a lot of times and they're telling me the things that have been going on in their life. And it's like that, and I'm like, just, take a minute to like recognize how much you have been through and just it's amazing. I mean, obviously I'm like, I always think women are amazing, just all the things
Yeah.
that they go, you had a child, your father passed away, you're supporting your mom, you're changing jobs, like then the pandemic happened in the middle of that too. I mean, that's a
Yeah, there was that
ton.
too.
Yeah, there was that. We didn't even talk about that part. But how much that is outside of like that's an external stressor, like not a normal everyday occurrence. Which is just amazing. And I guess I think too of I can really identify with the like I'd rather get angry than get sad. I think there's like a protective thing around being angry of I'm not going to let myself get hurt. I'm not going to let myself get vulnerable. So I'm just going to be angry. And I think a lot of people probably can relate to that and maybe not even realize that it is that's what's, would you say that's the same for you of because you were saying not really processing those feelings and just getting angry instead?
Yes, yes. And that's exactly what it is. You just hit the nail on the head too, because feeling anything other than anger is vulnerable.
Yeah.
And really allowing yourself to feel that sadness and whatever else is in there,
Hmm.
shame, guilt, any of that, it's vulnerable. And so anger is such an easy go-to emotion. And really what it is, anger is that secondary emotion. So like your primary emotions is everything else that's like underneath it. So your anger serves as like a protection, because it feels safe. It feels
Hmm.
safe. It really feels like that protector,
Hmm.
right? Like, kind of like a shield, like it's going to guard you from like feeling what you need to feel.
Hmm.
Because feeling anything else is vulnerable, but
Hmm.
not feeling those things is really, not processing the feelings that you need to process. It just builds up. It keeps building up, keeps building
Hmm.
up. And kind of like the way I look at it, and I actually just referenced this the other day too. When you keep stuffing it down, stuffing it down, stuffing it down, and the anger just builds up. Well, at
Hmm.
some point, it's going to reach its capacity and it's going to have no other way but to like come out, right? So, like, I think
Hmm.
of like, like the cartoon character where, they turn like really, really, really red and then they have like the steam coming out from their head. And that's really what it is. It just ends up, it has no other way but to like eventually come out. And I think
Hmm.
a lot of people end up either like resorting to anger as a go-to emotion, and then and potentially even like just living in that space without even realizing it.
Hmm.
um and then you wonder why, you have some like turmoil in relationships, and not only with with a significant other, but in any kind of relationship with your
Hmm.
children, or with a parent, even friends, colleagues,
Hmm.
and that's really what it comes down to, is you have to like turn it back on yourself and take a look and ask like what's really going on here.
Yeah, which is so hard. I thought of too while you were talking, Brene Brown talks a lot about how you can't, we want to protect from feeling that vulnerability and feeling pain and feeling, um but if we protect against feeling that, you can't only not feel some emotion, like you can't. Sorry, the vacuum is going off. We have one of those robot vacuum, like a Roomba, and the kids like to touch it, and I hear it going off right now. So hopefully you guys can hear that.
I can't hear it at all.
Mom life, mom life.
It's her life.
But she talks about, I feel like I'm not saying it well, but basically you can't suppress certain emotions. You're going to suppress all emotions. So you can't, if you suppress that feeling vulnerable and feeling sad, you're also suppressing joy and happiness and love. And,
Yes.
I think I remember her giving an example of somebody she interviewed, and it was a man, and I think older, and his wife had passed away, and a regret of his was that he never really got excited about anything. And, if he could have, because of, oh gosh, I'm butchering the story. I'm going to have to find it. But basically, yeah, he, as a protective kind of thing, he never really, always stayed very even keel throughout his whole life. Never really never experienced really low, kind of protected against the lows, but then that also kept him from feeling those higher, wonderful, emotions that we want to feel, of feeling happy and joy and laughter and love. And it's interesting. I remember learning that and being like, do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And yeah, I resonate with that, because when I was in that like constant state of anger, joy was really hard to come by. And you
Mm-hmm.
said love, and that's so right too, because like with my story with my husband and the turmoil that kind of resulted out of that, when he finally opened up to me about how he was feeling and like what my pain was causing him, of course,
Mm-hmm.
no communication was happening there. And so he was taking my projection onto him personally, not realizing that what was happening was my pain. That was my pain that I was projecting,
Yeah.
not that I was like intentionally, like just being angry at him.
Yeah.
So there was that. And then, and what happened ultimately is that he felt like he was losing love for me, because he had been holding it in for so long. And when he finally confessed to me, he was like, I don't even know how I feel anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really like, when I said the wake up call, that was like my wake up call. And when I look back to at that moment, what was challenging for me is, for a long time, I was pushing his love away.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in that state of anger, I was pushing his love away. I wasn't open to receiving it.
Because that's vulnerable, right?
So vulnerable. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just like angry at the world. Like, why did the world, why did it take my father away? Like, he's not here. He was not able to meet his granddaughter. Just so much, like, really, really victim mentality. Right. And rightfully so, in the sense that, what happened was terrible, and I had a right to feel that way, but I just wasn't processing it. And so not only was I unable to receive his love, but I also was not willing to give any love. I had no love to give. I gave any love that I had went to my daughter. She was like my shining light through everything. And I just thank the Lord that I have her and like had her through that, even though that was like an added stress, really, it was like, thank God I have her, like, because she's what's keeping me grounded right now. And then, when I finally sought help, I realized that I was going through a depression too. So there was that layer as well. So it was opening my eyes to, oh, yes, that is a lot of my reality right now. I hadn't even like considered that, but there was also that happening. So a lot of just sadness and just living in like that, that dark cloud. So yeah, when you say you suppress everything, you suppress everything. So not only what you need to process, but you suppress all like, the good, like high vibe, vibration and like feelings and emotions too.
Yeah. So what did that look like for you that, you obviously, okay, you came to this, fork in the road or whatever you want to call it, something had to change. What was the next step you took then?
So I sought a therapist. That was like my first step. I saw a therapist and really started and really actually initially I wanted to seek out a couples therapist so
Mhm.
that we could work on our marriage. But we both, my husband and I, mutually agreed that we both really needed to work on ourselves independently first.
Mhm.
And so that's the route that we took. And so I sought my own therapist, and I really went into it. I knew I needed to work on myself, but I really went into it with like, I need to fix my marriage. That's the
Mhm.
problem here.
Yeah.
But then, you start peeling back the layers of the onion, and then that's when you start really like looking at everything. And it's like, oh, I mean, it wasn't like until like a month or two into that therapy where I realized that I was going through a depression. And it
Mm.
was then that, when we talk about vulnerable, I, still remember sitting in that session to this day, like, oh,
Mhm.
like, yeah, that's what's happening here. Um,
Mhm.
so
What
yeah,
was that realization? What helped you to see that you were
she helped me to see
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
And because still in that moment, I think I was like, there was a lot of denial there, and I was
Mhm.
really kind of like still projecting, right? So like, oh, well, my husband is going through this, and
Mm.
and so I was really kind of like projecting it to like in his direction. And then she's the one who really kind of kept turning it back on me, kept turning it back on me, which she needed to do that, until I was willing to see it. And that was my realization, when I finally saw it. And I just remember, like, it was just like a light bulb went off, and I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, like, oh, maybe I'm going through a depression. And she was like, because she didn't want to say it. She wanted me to
Yeah.
have a realization. And I was like, she
Mhm.
just looked at me and she was like, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And she's like, and that's okay. Like, you
Yeah.
went through a lot. Like, you need to really take the time to heal.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so that was kind of like another wake up call for me. That was when I was really like, okay, I have a lot that I need to work on here.
Mhm.
And so I was in therapy for a few months before I decided to also take the route of um, seeking out a life coach, which
Mhm.
is how I met you in the community that we're both a part of.
Yeah, yeah.
So I did those two simultaneously for a while, and I
Okay.
only just recently stopped seeing my therapist.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm still very much working on myself, and
Mhm.
but to see the growth that I've overcome in that time. So this was like at the end of 2021, so over like a year and a half now.
Mhm.
Um, Tremendous growth, a lot of healing, a lot of self-realization.
Yeah.
Um, and, just to put on the record, my husband and I are in a much better place now.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Uh,
yeah. But I know there's more to this. So I don't know if you want me to dive into.
yeah, I was gonna say, that was my next question was then, okay, so we talked a lot about, what was going on mentally and emotionally, and just that scenario, but then things kind of started showing up in your body too. What did that look like for you?
Yeah. So, prior to having my daughter, I had, and I'm just kind of like going to paint the picture a little bit here, but prior to having my
Yeah.
daughter, I had been off of birth control for years. So my
Mhm.
body was not on any kind of birth control for years. And then, I feel like this is kind of like norm, and I'm using quotes here, but like,
Yeah.
I was like still pregnant at the end of my term, and they were, okay, have you considered what birth control you're going on? And I was like, well, do I really need to go on, and it was
Yeah.
so heavily encouraged
Yeah.
because, you're so fertile after you have baby, and they don't want you, getting knocked up again. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, so like 6 weeks after, having her, I had an IUD put in.
Mhm.
And so add that, the suppressing of not only are the hormones all like, like
All over the place
excellent. So
postpartum.
you can talk about that. They're all over the place, from like the pregnancy, having the baby, breastfeeding, all of that. But let's just throw birth control in the mix too
Mhm.
while we're at it. So I had my IUD for about 3 years, and then I had it removed. It was a 5-year like, term IUD, but I had it removed after 3 because my husband and I really have an interest in growing our family. So I
Mhm.
had this removed last June. So almost a year ago now. And within the first month, I started immediately noticing symptoms in my body
Mhm.
that just seemed completely off.
Mhm.
So it first started presenting itself in the form of mood swings.
Mhm.
So my initial thought was, oh no, am I spiraling again?
Uh, yeah.
Am I like going back into
Mhm.
old patterns? Like, what is happening? Because a
Mhm.
lot of that anger started coming back up. And I think it was more anger with self because of the mood swings I had. I couldn't understand like what was manifesting in my body. Like, what is like, why am I just all over the place here? So that was happening. And then extreme exhaustion,
Mhm.
just like extreme fatigue day to day. Could not get through, and even still to this day I still struggle with this, but couldn't get through a day without taking a nap
Mhm.
in the afternoon. Just really, really like just so tired,
Mhm.
draining, completely depleted. And then diarrhea. So a lot
Mhm.
of that. So that was like a change in my body.
That was new. Yeah, not your
That was new.
norm. Uh-huh.
Yep, that was new. And then just unexplained weight gain. The
Uh-huh.
scale started creeping up.
Mhm.
And I take great pride in my nutrition,
Yeah.
um, my diet and exercise. I've been on my own fitness journey for over a decade. So like I know my body well from that perspective. I know what to feed my body, all of that. So the weight gain was completely unexplained, completely out of the
Mhm.
blue. And I just was like, what is happening right now? And
Yeah.
the scale just kept creeping up. And it was like over the course of like 3, 4 months that it just kept going up, kept going up, kept going up. And I was like, oh my God, and just like, even now I'm plateaued now at where I put on like 10 pounds.
Mhm.
And it's plateaued fortunately, but I said it to you too. Like I kind of look at my body and I don't like really recognize it, because it's just like, it's
Yeah.
like, it's just not me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what is that? So that it was a lot of those like physical symptoms that really happened in my body. And so I did go see my OBGYN, and I was like,
Mhm.
okay, can we, because at that point I had started kind of educating myself. I started reading and really realizing that, oh, these are probably symptoms of like a potential hormonal imbalance
Mhm.
that could result from like, birth control. And so I was really interested in having some like a blood panel done. And so that's when I went to see my OB, and I was like, okay, let's talk about this. Um, and as it would have it, I really was kind of dismissed.
Mhm.
They humored me. I had to really demand the blood work. It was
Mhm.
really like a stretch. They were kind of like, well, even if we discover a hormonal imbalance in you, what do you want us to do? Like the only solution would be to put you back on birth control. And
Yeah.
they said to me, oh, and we'll put you on an antidepressant. I was like,
Yeah.
no, like, no, that's not what I
Mhm.
want. I don't want just a band-aid here. I really want
Yeah.
to dive in and figure out what's going on. And so they did pull the blood. Um, but like you and I discussed, it came back normal. And I'm using
Normal. Air
quote
quotes.
unquote air
Yeah.
quotes here within the normal range. So really I just kind of felt like, am I crazy? Like, what
Mhm.
is like, is what I'm feeling and what I'm going through like
Mhm.
just a part of aging?
Yeah.
What is
Mhm.
this? Oh, and then on top of that, we have not been able to get pregnant. So I
Mhm.
really suspected that I was having some fertility issues as well,
Yeah.
with all of that. So
Yeah. Well, and for me, and of course, this is like what I do. I talk to women that are, in quote, burnout. And I work with women. And so I can see these patterns. I just look at, yeah, you went through all this, everything you talked about before this, you went through years of just a lot of emotional turmoil, and you had a child, and we know that you're, just changes in the gut microbiome, and we can have onset of autoimmune, your body really like isn't the same after you've had kids. and then you had a whole lot of, I'm just going to say trauma, on top of that. And then I think that's why I love having conversations about these is, gosh, hopefully somebody hears this and, can say, yeah, I did that too. And I feel like they just want to put me on antidepressants, or they told me everything was normal, but my body doesn't feel normal. And it's just so like unfortunate, that happens to, you know, a large percentage of women, where they're doing that. They're going through a very similar situation. They're going to their doctor and hoping to get help and really just getting dismissed, like you said. So, yeah. So, did anybody ever make that connection for you of just or did you even think like, maybe everything I went through, or did you think it was more from the IUD that kind of led to what you're experiencing?
Yeah, it really, I thought for sure it was directly linked
Hmm.
to the IUD, the birth control,
Hmm.
because it was kind of like, um, I had it removed. That's when the physical symptoms started happening.
Yeah,
Right?
was
So it was like
really.
cause and effect kind of thing.
Hmm.
But it wasn't until I started talking to you and hearing more about what you call burnout,
Hmm.
um, that I really started realizing like, oh, yeah, all the stressors
Hmm.
that have happened leading up to
Hmm.
that, it's just, it's like a compilation of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy. I just think of, again, I know you said earlier, I feel like I hear that from like women will tell me like, oh, I went through these 10 things in the last 3 years, but we muscle on. And like, I just think of, I'm looking at, your form here, and like your Instagram is even running on grit. We like keep going, and cause especially if we're mom and we've got to keep it all together and take care of everybody, and it weighs on us. It really does affect our body physically. So looking back, so what those big signs for you were, you said weight gain, the exhaustion, the not able to get pregnant. And did you get pregnant pretty easily the first time with your daughter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that
I
was
had
definitely
two
a change.
pregnancies. One was unsuccessful and one was successful, but both of them, they were like immediate. It was like
Hmm.
one try and done.
Yeah.
Uh, and I know our bodies change over time. So I knew that there was like, the chance that it might take some time,
Hmm.
you know, um, but just pair that with the physical symptoms I was going through, and then what I was reading about with like, potential hormonal imbalance and
Hmm.
what that can impact and just how it can impact fertility. I was like, I'm like, I said to my husband, I'm like, we can keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, but we could be trying for a really long time without
Yeah.
any results. And
Hmm.
and that was when I had started talking with you about
Hmm.
working with you. And I knew that like going down this journey with you, that I would need to make some changes, and that would include like putting that on pause for a little bit,
Hmm.
trying. And my husband and I were like, yeah, no, let's heal your body. Let's heal
Hmm.
your body. Let's get you well again so that you can actually feel good.
Yeah.
And then we can revisit.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I think of just, yeah, you think being pregnant, like pregnancy being so demanding, and then like coming into a pregnancy from like I don't want to say, but like a depleted state, is then challenging then too. So what do you think, just for, if somebody's out there listening and they're like, gosh, like they're really seeing themselves in your story. Um, what do you think? I love that you sought out answers, even though you felt dismissed by your doctor. You were like, no, I'm gonna keep, you mentioned like educating yourself. Like, what would, I guess, if somebody were in your similar circumstance, what advice would you have, for them, of like things that they should be doing or looking for?
Yeah, I would say definitely, if you're in a position where well, first of all, seek help, right? If you're not feeling great, like I think the biggest thing that we do as women is we dismiss ourselves. You
Mhm.
know, our body presents us symptoms that sometimes we just ignore, right? And that
Mhm.
going back to like just muscle through, like I'll deal with that later, I'll deal with that later, or no big deal, right? Like, oh, you know, just some weight gain,
Mhm.
no big deal, or just, you know, whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
It can be easily
We put the
dismissed,
kids
but
first
right,
and
exactly.
everybody else first.
Yes, yeah, putting everyone else first and putting ourselves on the back burner. And someday when, you know, everything else is perfect, which there is no such thing, and that's a whole other conversation, but
Yeah.
you know, we try to just kind of like wait until that perfect time, and there is no perfect time.
Mhm.
And you know, I just think that if there is any part of you that you're feeling off in your body, listen to your body,
Mhm.
listen to yourself, because you know your body best, and your body is giving you a symptom,
Mhm.
and your body's telling you something, I need some attention here. So
Mhm.
I think that that's the first thing, is definitely don't ignore whatever it is that you're going through in your symptoms. Listen to it and seek help. And if you find yourself getting dismissed by Western medicine, don't stop there. You know,
Mhm.
keep looking. And that's what I did. I mean, that's how I found you, and I was like, okay, I'm open to having a conversation
Mhm.
about it. Um, and I think that the other thing I would say is, again, going back to start making yourself a priority,
Mhm.
and don't hesitate on investing in yourself.
Yeah.
So not only financially, but energetically, emotionally, all of that.
Mhm.
And time investment too, because you know, it can take some time and some patience to, you know,
Mhm.
to heal and to go through what you need to go through, but you're worth it.
Yeah.
You know, you're
Yeah.
worthy of that, and you're worthy of feeling good in your body.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I think that's beautifully said. Yeah. I just was thinking of, you've been on this journey, we're talking about of just like going through therapy and then life coaching and just really investing in yourself. And yeah, I love I feel like I'm always on a personal development journey. I feel like I remember like a motivational speaker coming to our school in like grade school. And I feel like I've forever been like, let me read this book and let me do this differently. But it's yeah, I I don't know. I just love it, I guess. I don't know where I was going with that one. But okay, so tell us a little bit about your podcast and then tell us where we can connect with you and just a little bit about how about like your shift now of just going from working in corporate to now going out on your own and working for yourself, because I think a lot of the women that listen, are either high achieving women that are in a corporate setting or are entrepreneurs as well. So
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So my podcast, Redefining Anger, I created that really as like a passion project, and it
mhm,
was really to get my story out there, because for me, you know, initially I felt a lot of shame with what
mhm,
I went through. So much shame with the anger I felt, and for causing my husband pain as well.
mhm,
And there was a lot of shame there, and I hid from it for a little while. It took me a while to open up about it, but when I finally started opening up about it and sharing it, so you know, sharing with, like, I'd pick and choose, like, oh, maybe it's safe to tell this friend, maybe it's safe to tell
mm,
that friend. But as I started doing that, I noticed that people were, you know, people who really loved me didn't stop loving me. You know, like
yeah.
they were incredibly supportive, and accepting of me and my story and everything I was going through. And so that was eye opening to me, because I think that was one of the things I feared, was like being judged,
Mhm,
and what people would think. And so the more I opened up, the more I started healing. And
mhm,
that was like a telltale sign for me. It was like, okay, I need to share more of this. And
mhm,
then the more I shared, the more people started coming up to me and just sharing how inspirational I was, and like just an impact that my story was making on them. So hence the reason why I birthed my podcast, really
yeah.
just to get my story out there. and to share my journey, really, because I'm still very much in that growth journey, and growth never really ends, right? So just
Exactly, right?
sharing along the process, along as I go, again, just to provide inspiration to others. And it also serves as a platform too for others to share their story. So,
Mhm.
if they want to open up and share their story from a healing place, and then also to provide inspiration to others. And I think my mission there is to just normalize feeling. And then
Mhm.
just to change the script on anger, because there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of shame around anger. And I think
Mhm.
we either shy away from admitting that we have anger because of that, or we just it's kind of one of the, it's like, we don't want to talk about it.
Mhm.
And so it's just to change the script on that anger is not necessarily a bad thing. When anger
Mhm.
shows up, it's there as a sign.
Mhm.
And it's what you do with it, and it's how you use that anger. So anyway, that's really where my
Yeah.
podcast came from. And
It's so needed.
yeah,
Because I think of like when you were talking about just the movie, I think it is right, anger management. You think of angry as like, oh, you have an anger problem.
right.
Rather like you're saying, anger really being a sign of that's like a sign that okay, there's more here, there's more going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And just to normalize it a little bit more,
Mhm.
that it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to even feel it.
Mhm.
You also need to be able to feel it too, to also make space for, to feel everything else. So yeah, there's so much there to unpack, but so that's really what that is. And I can be found on Instagram
Yeah.
primarily. That's really where I hang out. So
Mhm.
running on grit, it's running.on.grit.
Mhm.
And
We'll link it.
yeah, and I started that page well before any of this happened. And I started it really as a platform to share my fitness journey. And it's
Mhm.
really molded and developed since then. I share a lot. It's a lot of everything, a lot of my fitness, a lot of personal development, just a lot of vulnerability on there. So, people who just want more of me, they come to follow me on there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the career transition, oh my goodness, there's a lot there too. I know we didn't really dive into here. I share about that in my podcast. So if anybody's really curious
Awesome.
about that,
We can check it out there.
please check out the podcast. But yeah, I am now, I'm transitioning from corporate to, I guess you can say entrepreneur. It's still funny for me to like identify that way.
Yeah.
Because I'm still very green, very much in startup. But it's exciting and it's exhilarating, and I'm looking at it as like another growth opportunity for me.
Mhm.
And I think what it is I'm realizing more than ever now that really this is what I meant to be. For the longest time, I thought that I'd be in corporate forever. And
Mhm.
now, having gone through my growth journey and seeing where I'm at, like I see myself so differently now. I have a lot more confidence. I show up differently in my
Mhm.
life. And I see myself more as a leader. And so I'm just so excited to be able to put myself out there in a different capacity into the world now.
Mhm. That's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that you're able to I love when I see women own that, like you said, I see myself as a leader. I think that that is so awesome when women can be confident and own their own their value, own what's great about them. Cause I think there's so much of like, oh, we go like, oh, no, no, not me. Like, oh, just, it's like if somebody compliments us on an outfit, we're like, oh, I got it on sale and it's old and no big deal,
Yes.
versus like, yeah, I'm kind of badass. I kind of do this thing and it's awesome. So yeah, I love that you just own that right there. So,
Yeah.
and
And
totally
that
just speaks to the personal development and all the work that you've done.
yes, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. I mean, the Kim a year ago before I started, yeah, I'm just a completely different person now. And I always aspired to be that woman with this kind of confidence. And for me to
Mhm.
be here now, and I still have my days. I'm human, right? It's all my
Yeah.
my days, my insecurities, but to be where I am now, man, I inspire myself. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, it's pretty incredible. Yeah, I think it's pretty incredible. And I just think that, we all have it in us. We
Yeah.
all have it in us. We just need to go after it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing our story or your story with us. Excuse me, sharing our story. Yes, go follow Kim, go check out her podcast. We will link it in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.